Now, during these programs, you have heard Dr. Habermas constantly refer to historical facts about Jesus that are accepted by virtually all critical scholars. Well, what? I asked him to tell you what these 12 facts are and then why all scholars accept them as true. Listen.
The question here, obviously, is what kind of data do we have? What are these facts that I keep referring to? Because some people are going to be screaming now saying, there are no facts. Okay. What is our audience? Evangelicals are going to look at the New Testament text and say, facts are all over the place. Every time I read and find one, that's a fact because I believe Scripture is inspired. Others will say, no, it's only a book of ancient literature. Now you have to ask the question, which are believable facts and which are not? Most scholars will give you a list of facts surrounding the events that Christians call the gospel, the trial, the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus. I think there are at least 12 facts, at least 12. I mean, the vast majority of scholars will give you more than these, but there are at least 12 facts that critical scholars admit. Virtually every scholar will admit virtually every one of these. 1, Jesus died by crucifixion. 2, he was buried. Nothing strange about these things. Most people die, most people are buried. 3, his death caused the disciples to despair and lose hope, believing his life had ended. What would you say if your best friend died and very suddenly? 4. Now I admit this one is not as widely held, but many scholars believe that the tomb in which Jesus was buried was discovered to be empty just a few days later. 5. The disciples had experiences, and I'll say this the way that even the critics will be able to accept it, I think. The disciples had experiences which they believed were literal appearances of the risen Jesus. They thought Jesus appeared to them. 6. Because of these experiences, they were transformed from doubters. They were afraid of their own shadow, so to speak, certainly afraid to identify themselves with Jesus, into bold proclaimers of his death and resurrection. 7. This message was the center of preaching in the early church. Remember, Paul said, of first importance, death, burial, resurrection of Jesus. 8. This message was especially proclaimed in the environs of Jerusalem, where Jesus died and was buried just shortly before. 9. As a result of this preaching, the church was born, and it grew. 10. Sunday became the primary day of worship, and that's significant for Jewish believers. 11. James, who had been a skeptic, was converted to the faith when he also believed that he saw the resurrected Jesus. And 12. A few years later, Paul was converted by an experience which he likewise believed to be an appearance of the risen Jesus. What I'm saying here is that with the exception of the empty tomb, virtually all critical scholars accept this list as historical, and most of them will even grant the empty tomb. And if you want to check some of the writings I've done on this, the historical Jesus, and some of the books by others, you can find lists of critical scholars who accept all of these things. Now you might say, well, wait a minute, 12, that's not bad. But can we cut this list down? Can we get some more skeptics involved by being even more picky in what we take? All right, I'll arbitrarily reduce this list to, say, 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And if I were to reduce this list, I would say something like the following. Jesus died due to crucifixion. The disciples had experiences that they believed were appearances of the risen Jesus. Their lives were transformed because of that. And later, a man named Saul of Tarsus believed that he was converted to Jesus by an appearance, a personal appearance of the risen Jesus to him. These are 4 tough facts that virtually anybody is going to give you. And I think that we can build a case for that central proclamation of the death and resurrection of Jesus based on just these 4 facts alone.